rising prices, empty shelves, a currency that seems to lose value overnight. Sound familiar? In 2023, inflation is dominating headlines, with families around the world struggling to make ends meet. But this isn't the first time an economy has spiraled out of control. Over a century ago, the Weimar Republic experienced one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in history, a crisis so severe, it helped pave the way for the rise of Adolf Hitler. Are we repeating history's economic mistakes? Let's dive in. Today, inflation is a global problem. From the United States to Europe to developing nations, the cost of food, energy, and housing is skyrocketing. In 2022, the U.S. saw inflation hit a 40-year high, with prices rising by over 9%. In the UK, inflation reached double digits for the first time since the 1980s. Argentina's inflation rate surpassed 100% in 2023, the highest in 3 decades, devastating purchasing power. But what's causing this crisis? Economists point to a perfect storm of factors: supply chain disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic, skyrocketing energy prices due to the war in Ukraine, and massive government stimulus packages that flooded economies with cash. Central banks' quantitative easing, injecting trillions of dollars into the financial system, played a role in keeping economies afloat during the pandemic but contributed to excessive liquidity and inflationary pressures. Food prices alone surged globally, increasing by 14.3% in 2022 according to the FAO Food Price Index, affecting billions of people. Energy prices in Europe spiked 40%, creating an affordability crisis. The ripple effects included protests in countries like Sri Lanka, where economic hardships led to political upheaval, and Turkey, where inflation exceeded 85% in late 2022. While today's inflation is severe, it pales in comparison to one of history's most infamous economic disasters, the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic. After World War I, Germany was in shambles. The Treaty of Versailles imposed crippling reparations, totaling 132 billion gold marks, equivalent to over $269 billion in today's dollars. With its industrial capacity decimated and reparations denominated in foreign currency, Germany's government turned to printing money to meet payments and rebuild the economy. At first, inflation was manageable, but by 1923, it spiraled out of control. Prices doubled every few days. A loaf of bread that cost 160 marks in 1922 cost 200 billion marks by November 1923. At its peak, the exchange rate was 4.2 trillion marks to $1. Workers were paid multiple times a day just to buy essentials before prices soared further. By October 1923, the inflation rate was a staggering 29,500% per month. The social consequences were catastrophic. Savings evaporated overnight. Middle-class families lost everything, while speculators hoarded hard assets and profited. Unemployment surged and crime rates rose as desperation set in. Trust in government and financial institutions was obliterated. This economic collapse didn't just hurt Germany, it destabilized Europe and created fertile ground for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. By 1933, Hitler seized power, and the world was on the path to World War II. Let's break down the parallels between Weimar Germany's hyperinflation and today's inflation crisis. 1. Economic instability. Both periods were marked by external shocks: World War I reparations for Weimar Germany, and the COVID-19 pandemic and Ukraine war for today. Supply chains and critical industries were severely disrupted. 2. Government debt. In both cases, governments turned to printing money to cover their debts, leading to currency devaluation and loss of public confidence. In the U.S., national debt has ballooned to over $33 trillion, sparking debates over fiscal sustainability. 3. Social unrest. Rising prices fueled anger and frustration. In Weimar Germany, strikes and protests became common, while today, countries like Sri Lanka and Lebanon have seen mass demonstrations over economic hardships. 4. Global impact. The Weimar crisis destabilized Europe, while today's inflation affects interconnected global markets, from trade disruptions to energy price volatility. Developing nations face a debt crisis, with over 60% of low-income countries in debt distress as of 2023. The difference? Central banks today have tools like interest rate hikes and bond buybacks to combat inflation. But as interest rates rise, borrowing costs escalate, potentially triggering recessions. So, what can we learn from the Weimar Republic? First, history shows us that unchecked inflation can have catastrophic consequences, not just for economies but for societies. Policymakers must strike a balance between stimulating growth and controlling inflation. Second, trust in institutions is fragile. Once eroded, it's difficult to rebuild. Transparency in monetary policy and communication is essential. Finally, crises breed extremism. The 1920s saw the rise of fascism in Europe. Today, political polarization is intensifying worldwide. By addressing inflation now, we can prevent history from repeating itself. Inflation is more than just numbers on a screen, it's a force that shapes societies and changes history. By understanding the mistakes of the past, we can work to create a better future. What do you think? Are we doomed to repeat history, or can we forge a new path? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more videos that connect the past to the present. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.